Inside Temple's WHIP podcast studios, Dan Wilson sitting alongside Graham Foley for the first ever episode of the Where Were You podcast. Today is Friday, February 16th, 2018. It has been 12 days, but I can tell you it doesn't feel, I don't know if it, I honestly don't know if it feels longer or shorter, but I'll tell you this, my judgment of time over the past 2 weeks is not entirely accurate.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of broken up days, a lot of late nights, and a lot of fun. I'll definitely say that. We are going to be discussing our experiences with watching the Eagles win their first ever Super Bowl in Super Bowl 52. I'm going to let Graham talk for a minute here. This is something we had discussed literally for a lot of the school year, what we would do if this would happen. And didn't quite go as we originally planned, but I think everyone was happy. Just kind of how did you decide to watch where you watched, and how is that environment like for you and wherever you were watching the Super Bowl at?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We discussed all year when Carson Wentz was leading this team that, we had a chance to be in the Super Bowl, and we didn't know where we wanted to watch it because we all thought we had to watch it with our dads because for most of us, that's how we got into football. When I ever pictured this moment that the Eagles would win the Super Bowl, I always pictured it with my dad, but I also wanted to be in the city. When we came to Temple, I knew it would be a party if any one of the four teams won a championship, and I just really hope that one of the four could get it done. And Eagles are really the one. Like, there's no team that threw a bigger party when winning a championship than the Eagles did. So really, it's amazing that our sophomore year, they found a way to win. But so we were thinking, since we're in the city, we want to take advantage of that, stay in the city, and then go nuts in Center City when they win. So we discussed, do we bring our dads to Temple? Do they watch with us? And then, we go down and Burn City Hall where they talk about dad things, in our apartments, or do we go home? So that's why for the NFC Championship game, we weren't sure if we were going to win. Going into that, there were a lot of question marks about Nick Foles, about this team. I thought that would be the one that I would go home for. If they win, it was a big surprise. It'd be such a fun time, and it ended up being that way. And I could enjoy that with my dad. And I had a lot of great moments there with my brother and my dad. So I decided, and especially after talking with him, that, it could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be in the city when the Eagles win the Super Bowl. So I decided to stay on campus, to stay with the crew, most of it at least, that had watched every game with me so far this season, and then just go nuts in the city after they won. It ended up being a really, really fun time.
I ran into a similar conflict. We had discussed, all year. I actually did try and get my entire family to come down to Temple because, it's right there on Broad Street, right in the city, and would have been much easier access to kind of go nuts in Center City should they win this thing. I took a little bit of a harder route. I have no regrets about how I decided to where I decided to watch any of the playoff games. The first game against Atlanta, the divisional playoff game, we were still on spring break, and we were all. Did I say spring break? Winter break. We were all on winter break. Spring break. I'm already thinking forward towards spring break.
Yeah.
We were on winter break, and it was the final weekend of it, and we were home that Saturday. And I remember specifically looking at the originally when they came out with the playoff schedule on the final day of the regular season, where they were because they release, because the Eagles were guaranteed to host the playoff game, and this is back when the Eagles' hopes looked a little bit more bleak than they did. They ended up shattering those expectations. So at this point, but I still wanted to watch. They were scheduled on Saturday, and this was Martin Luther King Day weekend. We actually had Sixers tickets to the game that Monday at 1 o'clock on Martin Luther King Day. So I ended up coming back to campus on Sunday after the other playoff games have been played out. That was, of course, the Stephon Diggs catch, and that was the end of their miracle of their season.
Right.
But so I watched that at home, and then I was like, man, they're about to play in the first NFC Championship since we were in 5th grade. And I remember even at the beginning of elementary school watching that at home. So I really wanted to go home and watch that game. So me, you, and our good friend Aaron Strong all took the Paley Thorndale line from Temple back to me and him got off at the Wynwood train station. You got off in Downingtown. Okay, so you got off a little bit later in the train line, and we all went home, watched the game at our respective houses that we grew up in. of course, me and you actually got back on the train that night.
Because the
And
one thing is, I wanted to celebrate in the city, even if I was at home. I wanted to try to find the best of both worlds. So we ended up doing that.
we ended up doing. I have no regrets about how that was handled. I'm not sure if we've really ever talked about whether we would have changed anything about that or not. But I was perfectly happy with how that played out. And then for the Super Bowl, I essentially did the same thing. I went home. I'm like, if they win this, I need to see my dad's reaction. I need to see my brother's reaction. Even my mom, who's a converted sports fan, she grew up in North Jersey, never had any interest in the Giants or anything like that. So she just likes it because we like it, but has, as she's come a long way, she deserves credit for knowing absolutely, having never watched any sports at all. Too, she probably understands the most about baseball because that was mine and my brother's probably sport we played the most. So she started to understand a little bit of the strategy, that just following her own personal careers. But even the Eagles, she watched a decent number of games this year from when I was home and from what I hear even when we were at Temple. But so I came back into the city that night, and that train, I have never seen a Paoli Thorndale line like that. It is standing room only, people standing on chairs. I saw someone pack themselves into the overhead storage thing, like laying down. I mean, it was the purge on the train. Then you get off the train, and it was the purge again. I mean, all hell's breaking loose. And you've never seen anything like it, and you couldn't be more happy because all these people are celebrating the same thing. I timed it pretty well. The train came about a half hour after the game ended. I made it into the city about an hour, almost to like the minute that the game ended, and I didn't miss much. That party went on for many, many more hours. The NFC Championship people started heading in around 12:30, 1 o'clock. Maybe it's kind of when the crowd really took a hit, but the Super Bowl, there is no end to that crowd.
Absolutely.
So I was happy with how that happened. Now, during the game, you were it was you, our friend Max Bass, his girlfriend Bree, Addison, Aaron. Was there anyone else?
Yes, there were a few people there, and I want to get back to the celebration too. So we went to, we decided to go to Max, my roommate's girlfriend's house, because she has a bigger TV and a bigger room. And so it was me, Max, and my other two roommates, Addison and Kevin. Kevin's not that big of a football fan, and his team is the Ravens anyway. But he's rooting for the Eagles, just go nuts anyway. But we are all gigantic Eagles fans, and we also brought along Aaron, who is Dan's
my roommate, yeah,
and we brought
long-time high school friend growing up, and he went to high school with me.
And we brought along Will Evans, who lives in our building, and we're going to live with him next year. We're all diehard fans who go insane. First of all, I just want to talk about the walk over. We are all holding snacks. We're walking over to the view at Montgomery from University Village. That's where we watched the game. We live at University Village. It's like a 2-block walk, not even. It was the most tense moments of my entire life. Like, it felt like we were astronauts getting ready for like this mission. We were all holding our stuff. Total silence, because we were just thinking, like, we have been together all year long watching these games, and now it's coming to an end, and we have a chance to have something really special happen tonight, or we could have our hearts broken. It was just so intense. But we came in there, and it was Bree and a couple of her friends. And Bree's not much of a football fan. She picked the Steelers. She had a team. She was wearing Eagle stuff because Max bought her a lot of stuff. And it was two of her friends, and they're not big football fans either. And let me tell you, they had no idea what they were getting themselves into, because we walked in, they were just happy. We were watching the national anthem, whatever. They were excited for the game. When the first play happened, it was like a 3-yard gain. I forget what it was. It was nothing special. We all started going nuts and and just standing up, and they were just shocked. And that was the theme for the night: us going crazy and them not understanding.
Yeah, a message to anyone not aren't that big into sports, and don't have they not seen? I'm not big on some things in this world. Maybe whether it be the pop culture side of things or movies or stuff like that maybe some people who are not sports fans are into. And I understand that they go nuts when things like that happen, and I can see it coming. If the reverse happens, do they really live under a rock to the point where they don't see people they saw what happened after the NFC Championship? Is it really that big of a surprise?
I wonder. I mean, I don't think they were maybe not anticipating the celebration of the city or anything like that. But I think they just didn't understand how loud us 6 would be in a house for a game that we're not attending, because every time I yell at the TV or something like that, my brother and my sister like to say, they can't hear you, but it doesn't matter, we just go insane. So I think they expected the intensity of the game. They didn't expect it in that apartment, and they may have not seen, because we are really extraordinary fans. I think it means everything to us, like so many Eagles fans, and so I think they just didn't expect that. And yeah, I don't know, like people who do live with the pop culture, like I feel like my life would be boring without sports. I don't know about you, and I can tell you.
Well, that's me, but I'm saying there are people who have other interests, and I just use pop culture as an example. It could be
Right.
music, whatever, movies, whatever the case may be, and a lot of those things intersect. But I know enough to know that if I see a certain reaction to something, or I think people flooded the streets after President Obama won his first election.
Oh.
And so if I can know that that's going to happen, even if I'm not as dialed into that as I am in sports, I can see it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Why is there this big surprise of non-sports savvy people when people go nuts when something like this happens? They felt the buildup.
Mm-hmm.
Even like it was impossible to either go to school in Temple, go to school here at Temple or anywhere in the city, and not feel the city on edge, waiting for those 2 weeks to play in that game.
Yeah, it's all anyone talked about. I mean, you have to anticipate it, I think. And I saw some people I know that weren't sports fans that maybe had to pay attention for, like, my one class. We had a blog about the Super Bowl. Like, they started to understand a little more, and they had to pay attention for it. But I think it would have just missed them if not, which is just, I don't get that.
Yeah, shout out to my econ professor. I'm not going to call him out by name, but he was actually going to schedule a quiz the day of the parade. And I'm so glad Temple canceled class, because that is just a guy who is out of touch and doesn't have a clue.
Yeah.
Because you saw what the parade was. I don't get big on the numbers that were there. I don't think it makes a ton of sense to believe that. I remember the Phillies parade in 08 had an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people, and now they're throwing out 700,000 for the Eagles. Also, that article that had the 700,000 that this company in Manchester estimated the crowd with was only at the Art Museum, which makes me believe there were 700,000 at the Art Museum.
Right.
Does not include the parade route leading up to it at all.
And there's so many little things, like people that were in alleyways that couldn't be seen by the pictures of people leading out buildings and stuff. I don't take that.
I don't care.
But
so
just a side note too, with the game, and just like people who appreciate pop culture do appreciate some elements of the Super Bowl. It's such a huge event. I don't remember a second of Justin Timberlake's halftime show, and I watched it all. It was a blur, because all I could think about was, oh my goodness, is the Eagles defense going to stop them on the first drive? Is Gronk going to come out? Like, I was terrified.
I remember two things from that. Number one is apparently people who are big Justin Timberlake fans or were watching the game to see the Super Bowl halftime show were not happy with it.
That's what I heard.
Now, I don't remember at the time thinking anything of it, but he could have literally sat up there and just said nothing, and I probably wouldn't have even noticed.
I wouldn't have noticed, yeah.
And number two, he took some selfie with some overly privileged Patriots fan kid who
I did see that.
Looks like a tool anyway. So that kid's been spoiled.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
But did you see that kid went on Ellen?
Yeah, no, he went on Ellen. And he's got a VIP experience with the Patriots, and he seemed very excited and appreciative. I was glad he seemed like a very happy kid, as you should be.
Good for him. Good for him. Yeah. But the Eagles won.
Wait, time out. Did you see Freddie Mitchell too? So behind the selfie kid, on the other side of the aisle, who didn't get a selfie with Justin Timberlake, was the Eagles' former wide receiver, Freddie Mitchell, and I just thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, we have some stories about Freddie Mitchell that we can't talk about on this podcast.
We cannot.
But Freddie Mitchell's an interesting guy, and he's been with the Eagles. He wasn't particularly good in his time with the Eagles, but he's been following and been a fan of this team.
And he made the 4th and 26 catch. That cements your legacy. You're in Eagles.
Yeah, he's got one play.
Yeah.
That's all you really need. So, but this was a team that, when we first started watching this playoff run, and like I said, I want to go back to just the buildup of this entire season. I mean, we quite literally talked about this team getting to this point at some point during our Temple careers, and we're in like week 8.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
We were overly optimistic.
We were way ahead of ourselves. And then Wentz goes down in week 14 against the Rams, and you're like, oh man, like all optimism has been kind of diminished. And I'm sure
unless
you're Addison Hunsaker, and if he were in studio today, he would be making a huge plug for the brand right now.
He's a huge Foles fan, has been since 2013. He's someone who tweeted in 2015 that in Super Bowl 51, he was wrong by a year, Nick Foles would throw the game-winning touchdown pass to Zach Ertz. So he really predicted the Super Bowl and how it would end, just off by a year. So he's been a follower from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm actually a little upset he's missing today's show, because I'm sure he'd have a lot to say about this.
Would.
But anyway, and then he plays well in the Giants game. Defense didn't play well. They squeeze out a win. Raiders game, he does not play well.
Does not play at all well.
People, for some sign of hope, want him to play well in that meaningless Cowboys game that they lost 6-0. Probably the worst football game ever played.
Oh, my God.
He plays a quarter. They don't really do anything. They don't show anything. And now we have to sit for 2 weeks while we wait cautiously.
I was furious when they took out Foles to put in Sudfeld because my thought was, Sudfeld's not your starter in the playoffs. Some people said it online, and I laughed at them, and Addison would be laughing harder. I'm not going to call you out by name, but most of you who said Sudfeld, I'm not even going to go there. But I didn't understand why you take him out because you didn't see anything from that game that inspired confidence going forward. And, why take him out and risk that? I get the risk of injury. I think it would have been worth it to keep him playing.
You know what? 6 weeks later, it's really kind of hard to question Doug Peterson's decision.
That is a great point. That is, at the time, I guess.
At the time, yeah, we were. But as the time went on, we clearly saw that he put no stock in that game. Mm-hmm. He was going to take 2 weeks. Him, John DeFilippo, the quarterback's coach, who's now unfortunately no longer here, and Frank Reich, who's no longer here, both who have taken jobs with the Vikings and Colts respectively. Mm-hmm. They had a 2-week all-out, dedication to making Nick Foles a Super Bowl winning caliber quarterback.
And going back to what he did best,
and going back to what he did best, and you hear him talk about them watching the film back from when he was good in 2013. They win the Falcons game 15-10. Was a Julio Jones catch away from none of this ever happening.
Right, which is insane to me. Like I remember I was at that game and there's so many question marks going into it, but I remember standing in my section looking at the clock, and there wasn't much time left, and just thinking like, wow, the season's been so great, it could end right here. And just think like how different everything would be going into next year. Our thoughts about Nick Foles. Nick Foles' life, our lives, would be so different if, Matt Ryan just, if they called a better play, if, Julio was an taller, a lot of things.
But Vikings game wasn't even close. Nick Foles looks like the greatest quarterback of all time, and then they win the Super Bowl. And the Philly special will be a play that is talked about, I think, till the end of time.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing like winning your first Super Bowl in franchise history. Mm-hmm. And the Eagles are like the number one team. I mean, Philly loves all of its sports teams, but the Eagles probably are the number one team. I mean, I almost wonder, we're sitting here at age 20, will there ever be a sports celebration as good or as big as the one we had 2 weeks ago?
Not in Philadelphia, I don't think so, because this is the one.
I mean, we might have peaked as sports fans.
Yeah, we may have, yeah. We're 20 years
I'm okay with that, but it's kind of weird to think about that. And then, they take down the almighty dynasty of Belichick and Brady. And, everyone, as we're, building up the 2-week build-up to the Eagles, we can all say we found ways, and even the most optimistic of people, and I'm sure if Addison were here and he was speaking honestly, and maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, and the only reason I'm saying this is because he's always been a big Tom Brady and Bill Belichick advocate for how good they are. Uh-huh. Regardless of how good you think Nick Foles is. You could think Nick Foles is the second greatest quarterback of all time. Mm-hmm. Tom Brady is almost the undisputed GOAT at this point, or at the top two. Some people say Joe Montana or John Elway or guys of that caliber. But you can't, regardless of how good you think Nick Foles is or Doug Peterson is a coach, you can't count the Patriots out of a game, so you can't be overly optimistic.
Exactly. And going into that one, and that's what made the celebration so great. And I just want to wrap it up. The ending of that game, being in the city too, I think was amazing because the run from, first of all, right when the game ended, we were going to watch the trophy celebration, then we're outside. Our fire alarm went off. That's how
I saw videos of that.
Our fire alarm went off. So, but that sprint from from the View to Broad Street was the greatest moment of my life. The exhilaration of sprinting out there, just everyone yelling and thinking the Eagles just beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl was one of the greatest moments of my life.
Surreal. And we didn't even get to the parade. We were at the parade together. We got there at 6 in the morning.
And there are already
there's already people there. And we sat out in the cold.
Got a good spot.
We sat in the cold. We were pretty close. We saw them all go by on floats. We saw all the parade speeches. Jason Kelce will be remembered for. I mean,
we could have a whole episode.
We could have a whole episode on Jason Kelce. But Chase Utley, I thought, had one of the greatest speeches in sports celebration history when he said "World Bleeping Champions" in 2008, and Jason Kelce said, "Hold my beer," and he
went off,
and he just went off, and
it just capped what was the most amazing week I think I've ever experienced in Eagles history, really.
Yeah, first Super Bowl win. We have to wrap it up. We are out of time. Join us back next week. You have been listening to the Where Are You podcast, episode 1. For Dan Wilson and Graham Foley. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.